Hi everyone, welcome back. If you're seeking calm, deep rest, and peaceful sleep, you're in the right place. Let's begin.
For thousands of years, Zen masters have passed down ancient secrets about finding peace in a restless world. These teachings are not complex philosophies or difficult practices. They are simple truths that speak directly to the soul. Before we begin, feel free to share what time it is and where you're listening from. To guide us on this path, we will follow the journey of a young man named Kenji. His story explores the heart of Zen wisdom, and in his path, you may recognize your own. He carries burdens, wrestles with doubts, and wonders if peace is even possible. What he discovers can light your way to rest tonight. As we explore these stories, there is nothing you need to achieve or understand perfectly. Simply allow these ancient teachings to wash over you like gentle rain, dissolving tension and inviting your mind toward the deep rest it deserves. Relax. Take a slow, deep breath, and let's begin our journey together. In a farming village at the edge of the plains, there lived a young man named Kenji. He worked in the rice fields with his family, and from the outside, his life looked ordinary. But inside, Kenji felt constantly troubled. When someone spoke to him casually, he heard judgment in their tone. When plans changed, he took it as evidence that life was working against him. When he made small mistakes, they felt like proof he was failing. At night, he would replay the day's events over and over, each time finding new reasons to feel anxious. His father noticed. "You seem to carry the whole world on your shoulders," he said one evening. "Because the world is heavy," Kenji replied. His father shook his head. "Maybe. Or maybe you are just holding it wrong." Kenji did not understand what that meant. But a few days later, a traveling merchant mentioned a teacher who lived 3 valleys over. "He helped me see my life differently," the merchant said. Just by asking simple questions. Kenji decided he needed answers. He told his family he would be gone for a while and set out on foot. The journey took him through forests and across streams. His feet developed blisters. Rain soaked through his clothes one afternoon. But he kept walking because his mind gave him no peace. When he finally reached the temple, he felt disappointed. It was smaller than he imagined. Simpler. An old man was working in a vegetable garden, pulling weeds. "Excuse me," Kenji called out. "I am looking for the teacher." The old man looked up. Dirt covered his hands. "You found him." This was the master? Kenji had expected someone sitting in meditation, not someone with mud under his fingernails. "I have questions," Kenji said, "about why life is so difficult." The master stood and brushed off his hands. "Come walk with me." They walked through the temple grounds until they reached a large oak tree growing beside the main hall. The master stopped beneath it and looked up into the branches. "Do you see this tree?" he asked. Kenji nodded. Of course he saw it. It was right there. "Look at it carefully. Tell me what you see." Kenji looked. It is an old tree. Strong trunk. Wide branches. Green leaves. "Good," the master said. "Now come back at sunset." Kenji opened his mouth to protest, then closed it. He spent the afternoon sitting in the temple courtyard, watching monks go about their tasks. When the sun began to drop toward the horizon, the master appeared again. "Come," he said. They returned to the oak tree. The light had changed completely. Golden rays slanted through the branches. The leaves glowed. Shadows stretched long across the ground. Everything looked warmer, softer. "Now what do you see?" the master asked. Kenji stared up. "It looks different. Beautiful. Is it a different tree?" "No. Same tree." "Then what changed?" "The light," Kenji said slowly. The master nodded. "Come back at dawn tomorrow." The next morning, mist hung low over the grounds. The air felt cool and damp. The oak tree looked grey in the early light. Mysterious. Almost like it was half hidden in another world. "And now?" the master asked. "It looks quiet. Peaceful." "Same tree?" "Yes." That afternoon, a storm rolled in. Dark clouds covered the sky. Wind thrashed the branches. Rain pounded down. The master led Kenji outside despite the weather. They stood under the temple overhang, looking at the oak tree as it bent and swayed. "Now?" the master asked, raising his voice over the wind. The tree looked wild. Dangerous even. Like it might break or fall. Kenji felt uneasy looking at it. "It looks violent," he admitted. "Same tree?" Kenji wiped rain from his face. "Same tree. But it keeps looking different." "Yes," the master said. "The tree does not change. But the conditions around it change how you see it. Light, weather, time of day. Each one shows you something different. So tell me, which version is the real tree?" Kenji thought about this. "All of them? Or none of them?" "The tree is simply a tree," the master said. "It exists as it is. But your experience of the tree changes based on conditions. Some of those conditions are outside. Some are inside you." They went back inside and dried off. The master made tea. They sat in silence for a while. Finally, Kenji spoke. "You are saying my mind is like the weather. It changes how I see things." "Yes. So when I think everyone is judging me or that life is unfair, I might just be seeing things in stormlight." The master smiled. "You are understanding. But what if the problems are real?" Kenji asked. "What if people really are judging me?" "Sometimes they are," the master said. "Sometimes a tree really does fall in a storm. But more often, the tree is just a tree, and your mind is making it look dangerous because of the light you are seeing it in." Kenji sat with this. He thought about all the times he had been certain someone was upset with him, only to learn later they were just distracted. All the times he thought a situation was terrible, only to realize it was not that bad. His mind had been showing him stormlight when the sun was shining. "So how do I know when I am seeing clearly?" he asked. The master poured more tea. "That is what you must learn. But the first step is knowing that what you see is not always what is there. Once you know your mind adds light and shadow to everything, you can begin to notice when it is doing that." Kenji stayed at the temple for several more days. Each day, he looked at that oak tree in different conditions. He began to notice how his mood changed what he saw. When he felt peaceful, the tree looked friendly. When he felt anxious, even in good light, the tree looked threatening. His mind was painting everything he looked at. Kenji's story teaches us something essential about the human mind. We think we see reality as it is, but we are always seeing reality through the conditions of our own inner weather. Just like that oak tree looked different in sunset light versus storm light versus morning mist, everything in your life looks different depending on your mental state. The same conversation can seem fine when you are rested, but feel like an attack when you are exhausted. The same challenge can seem manageable when you are calm, but impossible when you are anxious. This is not about positive thinking or pretending problems do not exist. The master did not tell Kenji that storms are not real. He simply helped Kenji see that the tree itself does not change, even though it looks different under different conditions. Your life is like that tree. It has its actual reality, whatever that is. But the way you experience your life depends enormously on the inner conditions you are bringing to it. When your mind is calm, you see more clearly. When your mind is disturbed, everything gets distorted. This matters deeply for sleep. So many of us lie awake at night, seeing everything in storm light. A small worry becomes a catastrophe. A reasonable concern becomes proof that everything is falling apart. An uncertain situation becomes a guaranteed disaster. Your nighttime mind often shows you the worst possible version of your life, the same way that oak tree looked wild and dangerous during the storm. But just as the tree was still just a tree, your life is probably not as terrible as your anxious mind is showing you. The key insight is learning to recognize when you are seeing through disturbed conditions. When you notice your thoughts spiraling into worst-case scenarios, you can ask yourself what Kenji learned to ask. Am I seeing this clearly, or am I seeing this in stormlight? Often, you cannot change your circumstances immediately. You cannot make problems disappear. But you can recognize that the way those problems look to you right now might be distorted by the weather inside your mind. This recognition alone can bring relief. You do not have to solve every problem tonight. You do not have to figure everything out before you can rest. You just need to acknowledge that your tired, anxious mind is not the best judge of reality right now. Think of it this way. If you were standing in a thunderstorm looking at that oak tree, would you make major decisions about whether the tree was dangerous? Probably not. You would wait for the storm to pass and look again in better conditions. The same applies to your thoughts at night. When your mind is exhausted and spinning with worry, that is not the time to make big judgments about your life. That is stormlight. Wait for calmer conditions to assess what is actually true. This does not mean ignoring your problems. It means recognizing that you will see them more accurately when your inner weather improves. Get some rest. Let your nervous system settle. Then look again. You might find that what seemed catastrophic at midnight looks manageable at noon. What seemed like proof of failure in the dark looks like a normal setback in daylight. The situation did not change. Your inner conditions changed, and with them, what you could see. As you prepare for sleep tonight, remember the oak tree. Your life is still your life, regardless of how it looks to you right now. If everything seems overwhelming, that might just mean you are seeing in stormlight. The storm will pass. The tree will still be there. and you will see it more clearly when the conditions improve. For now, let yourself rest. You do not need to solve anything or fix anything or figure anything out. You just need to let the storm pass through your mind while you remain steady, like that tree rooted in something deeper than the weather. The next morning, Kenji woke feeling lighter. The lesson about the tree had helped him see his mind differently. But as he prepared to leave the temple and return home, doubt crept back in. He found the master sweeping the courtyard. "Master, I think I understand what you taught me, but I still feel alone with my struggles. Like no one really understands what it is like to be me." The master set down his broom. "Walk with me." They left the temple grounds and entered the forest behind it. A narrow path wound between the trees. The master walked slowly, in no apparent hurry. After a while, he stopped and pointed at the ground. "Look at these footprints." Kenji looked down. The dirt path was covered with footprints. Some fresh, some old and faded. Different sizes, different shapes. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, all heading in both directions. "Many people have walked this path," the master said. "Do you see?" "Yes." "Your footprints will join theirs. And tomorrow, someone else's footprints will cover yours. Tell me, is each person walking alone?" Kenji looked at the layered prints in the dirt. They walk at different times. So, in one sense, yes, each person walks alone. And in another sense, they are all walking the same path. The master nodded. "You think your struggles are unique to you, that no one else has felt what you feel. But look at these footprints. Every person who walked here was going somewhere. Every person had reasons. Every person had burdens they carried. Your journey is your own, but the path itself has been walked by countless others." They continued walking. The forest was thick here. Tall trees blocked most of the sunlight. Kenji could hear birds calling to each other in the canopy above. The master stopped again, this time beside a stream. Clear water flowed over smooth rocks. He knelt down and dipped his hand in. "Watch," he said. He pulled his hand out. Water dripped from his fingers back into the stream. Within seconds, there was no sign his hand had been there. The stream just kept flowing. "Where did the water from my hand go?" the master asked. Kenji looked at the stream. "Back into the flow. Can you tell which drops were on my hand and which were not?" "No." "They are all the same stream now," the master said. For a moment, some water was separate, touching my hand. But it returned. It was never truly separate, just temporarily apart. He stood and brushed water from his hand. "You are like that water. You feel separate, individual, alone. And in one way, you are. You have your own body, your own mind, your own experience. But in a deeper way, you are part of one flow. What you feel, others have felt. What you struggle with, others struggle with. You are temporarily apart, but never truly separate." Kenji watched the stream. He wanted to believe this, but it felt abstract. Easy to say, hard to feel. The master seemed to sense his doubt. "Come. I want to show you something else." They walked deeper into the forest, until they reached a small clearing. In the center stood a massive tree, far older than the oak at the temple. Its trunk was so wide, 3 people could not wrap their arms around it. "This tree has stood here for hundreds of years," the master said. "Look at its roots." Kenji looked. The roots spread out in all directions, thick and gnarled, disappearing into the earth. "These roots connect this tree to the soil," the master continued. "And in that soil are the roots of every other plant in this forest. Underground, everything is connected. A vast network you cannot see. Trees sharing water, sharing nutrients, warning each other of danger through chemical signals in the earth." He placed his hand on the trunk. Above ground, each tree looks separate, standing alone. But below, they are all part of one living system. What affects one tree affects others. What one tree takes in, it may share. They appear separate, but they are not. Kenji touched the rough bark. He tried to imagine the hidden world beneath his feet. Roots intertwining. Communication happening in the dark. "You see other people and think they are separate from you," the master said. "Different lives, different problems, different paths. And on the surface, this is true. But beneath what you can see, you are all connected. Your pain is not yours alone. Your loneliness is shared by countless others. Your fear is the same fear that has moved through humans for all time." "But I still feel alone," Kenji said quietly. "Yes, because you are looking above ground. You see the separate trees. You do not see the roots." The master sat down, his back against the massive trunk. "The feeling of separation is real. I am not saying it is not, but it is only part of the truth. The other part, the part you cannot see, is that you are held by something much larger than yourself." Kenji sat down beside him. The forest was quiet, except for the wind moving through leaves and distant bird calls. "When you return home," the master said, "you will still have your struggles. You will still feel alone sometimes. But remember this tree. Remember that what you see is not all that exists. Beneath your awareness, you are connected to every other person who has ever felt alone, ever struggled, ever wondered if they could keep going. Their roots touch yours. You are part of the forest, not a single tree standing by itself." They sat in silence for a long time. Kenji closed his eyes and tried to feel what the master was describing. At first, he felt nothing different. Just himself, sitting against a tree. But gradually, something shifted. He became aware of the sounds around him. Birds calling and being answered. Wind moving through branches in waves. The stream in the distance. Everything connected, everything responding to everything else. He was part of this. One breath among countless breaths. One heartbeat in a forest full of living things. Separate, yes, but also held within something larger. When he opened his eyes, the master was smiling at him. "You felt it," the master said. It was not a question. Kenji nodded. He did not have words for it. But something had changed. Kenji's second lesson goes deeper than the first. He learned that his mind changes how he sees things. Now, he learns that his sense of being separate from others is not the whole truth. This teaching appears throughout Zen Buddhism. The feeling of being an isolated individual, cut off from others and from life itself, is seen as a fundamental misunderstanding. Yes, you have a separate body. Yes, you have your own thoughts and experiences. But beneath that surface separation, you are connected to everything else in ways you cannot see. The footprints in the dirt show this beautifully. Each person who walked that path did so at a different time. In that moment, they were alone on the path. But the path itself held all their footprints together. The journey was shared even though the timing was different. Your struggles are like that. You might be facing them alone right now, in this particular moment. But the struggle itself has been faced by others before you and will be faced by others after you. You are walking a path that has been walked many times. Your footprints join countless others. This is not meant to minimize what you are going through. Your specific circumstances are yours. But the feelings those circumstances create, the fear and uncertainty and loneliness, these are deeply human experiences. They connect you to others rather than separating you. The stream shows another aspect of this. Water that briefly touched the master's hand returned to the stream. It could not be separated out anymore. It was part of the whole flow again. You are like that water. Sometimes you feel distinct, separate, like you have been pulled out of the flow. But you cannot actually be removed from the larger stream of life. You are always part of it, even when you feel isolated. The tree with its hidden roots offers maybe the most powerful image. Above ground, trees look completely separate, each one standing on its own. But beneath the surface, an entire network connects them. They share resources. They communicate. They support each other in ways that are invisible from above. Human beings are like this too. We look separate. We feel separate. But beneath what we can see, we are connected through our shared humanity. Your fear is not unique. Your pain has been felt by others. Your longing for peace is the same longing that moves through everyone. This matters for sleep because isolation creates anxiety. When you lie awake feeling like you are the only one struggling, like no one could understand what you are going through, that loneliness itself becomes another burden. It makes your problems feel heavier and more hopeless. But what if you remembered the roots? What if you knew, really knew, that what you are feeling is not yours alone? That your middle-of-the-night fears are the same fears that have kept humans awake for thousands of years? That your worries about being enough, doing enough, having enough are shared by almost everyone? This knowledge does not solve your problems. Kenji still had his struggles at the end of the story, but he felt less alone with them. And that shift, as small as it sounds, changes everything. When you feel connected to something larger than yourself, you do not have to carry everything alone. You can rest in the knowledge that you are held by a bigger system. Like that tree, you might look alone, but beneath the surface, you are supported by an entire forest. Think about what the Master said about the tree's roots. They share water and nutrients. They warn each other of danger. They support each other's growth. You are part of a system like that, even if you cannot see it. The support is there. The connection is there. You are not as alone as you feel. As you prepare for sleep tonight, imagine yourself as that tree. Yes, you stand in your own spot. Yes, your trunk is your own. But your roots go deep, and down there they touch the roots of every other person who has ever felt afraid, overwhelmed, uncertain. You are all connected in the dark soil where no one can see. Let yourself be held by that connection. You do not have to understand it fully or even believe it completely. Just entertain the possibility. What if you are not separate? What if your loneliness itself is connecting you to every other lonely person? What if your struggle is not isolating you, but joining you to the great human struggle toward peace? The forest does not demand that you solve everything yourself. The stream does not require each drop to know where it is going. The path does not judge which footprints are better than others. All of it simply exists, connected, flowing, supporting. You are part of that flow. Even when you cannot feel it. Even when the night is dark and you feel completely alone. The roots are there. The connection is there. You belong to something much bigger than your individual self. Rest in that tonight. Let the forest hold you. Let the stream carry you. Let your footprints join all the others who have walked before you and will walk after you. You are not separate. You never were. Kenji stayed at the temple for several more days after his walks with the master. During that time, he watched how the other monks and students carried themselves. Each one seemed to have found a particular way of being. One monk moved very slowly, every gesture careful and deliberate. Another spoke only in whispers. A third maintained perfect posture at all times, his back straight as bamboo. Kenji found himself trying to copy each of them, thinking perhaps one of these ways would finally make him feel at peace. One morning, he tried sitting like the silent monk, barely moving, controlling his breath. By afternoon, his back ached and his mind felt restless. The next day, he attempted the careful, deliberate movements of another monk. But his natural energy kept breaking through, making him feel like he was wearing clothes that did not fit. The master noticed. Of course he noticed. "Come," he said one evening. "Help me with something." They walked to a storage room where the temple kept various items. The master handed Kenji a wooden mask, the kind used in ceremonial dances. It had a serene, peaceful expression carved into it. "Put it on," the master said. Kenji did. The mask felt heavy and uncomfortable. He could not see well through the eye holes. "How does it feel?" the master asked. "Strange. Like I am pretending to be someone else." The master handed him another mask. This one looked fierce, with exaggerated anger in the carved features. "Try this one." Kenji switched masks. This one felt even worse. He could feel his face trying to match the expression, even though no one could see him. The master gave him a third mask, then a fourth, then a fifth. Each time, Kenji put one on, felt uncomfortable, and took it off. Finally, the master sat down. "You have been doing the same thing with the monks here, trying on their ways like masks, hoping one will fit." Kenji set down the last mask. "I thought if I found the right way to be, I would finally feel at peace." "And how has that worked?" Kenji rubbed his face where the masks had pressed against his skin. "It has not worked. I just feel more lost." The master stood and walked to a rain barrel outside the storage room. The water inside was still and dark. He gestured for Kenji to look in. "What do you see?" the master asked. Kenji looked down at the water. His own face looked back at him, not wearing any mask. Just his face, tired and uncertain. I see myself. Yes. And when you wore those masks, could you see your real face? No. The master picked up a small stone and dropped it in the barrel. Ripples spread across the surface, distorting Kenji's reflection. They both watched as the water slowly settled and his face appeared clearly again. Each time you try to be like someone else, you cover your true face, the master said. You put on a mask and then wonder why you feel false. But the answer is simple. You cannot be at peace while pretending to be someone you are not. Kenji looked at his reflection. But how do I know who I really am? I have been trying on different ways for so long. The master smiled. Tell me about when you were a child. Before you started watching how others act. What did you love to do? Kenji thought back. Images came to him. Running through the rice fields just for the joy of running. Laughing loudly when something amused him. Sitting by the river for hours, watching the water, not trying to meditate or practice anything, just looking because it interested him. I was more free, Kenji said quietly. I did not think about how to be. I just was. Yes, that is your face without masks. Not the face you had as a child exactly, but that quality of being yourself without effort or imitation. The master reached into the water and cupped some in his hands. Water does not try to be water. Bamboo does not study how to be bamboo. A stone does not practice being a stone. They simply are what they are. He let the water run through his fingers back into the barrel. When you stop trying to be something, you discover what you already are. Kenji watched the ripples fade again. But what if what I am is not good enough? What if I need to improve? There is a difference between natural growth and pretending to be something you are not, the master said. A bamboo shoot grows into a tall stalk, but it does not try to become a pine tree. It grows into its own nature more fully. That is not the same as wearing a mask. They walked back to the main hall. The evening meal was being prepared. Kenji could smell rice cooking and hear the quiet sounds of monks moving through their tasks. Tomorrow, try something, the master said. Do not copy anyone. Do not try to be peaceful or wise or proper. Just do what you do, move how you move, speak how you speak. See what happens. The next day, Kenji tried this. At first, it felt wrong. His natural energy seemed too much compared to the calm monks around him. His voice seemed too loud. His movements too quick. But as the day went on, something changed. He stopped fighting himself. When he felt like walking fast, he walked fast. When he wanted to sit still, he sat still. When something amused him, he let himself smile instead of maintaining a serious expression. By evening, he felt lighter than he had in weeks. He was not trying to be anyone. He was just being. The master found him sitting on the temple steps, watching the sunset. How was your day? The master asked. Strange. I felt more like myself than I have in a long time, but I also worried I was doing it wrong. The master sat beside him. And were you at peace? Kenji considered. More than when I was trying to copy others. Yes. then you were not doing it wrong. The master looked at the sunset. You will spend your whole life growing and changing, but you will never find peace by being someone else. The path to peace begins with removing the masks and seeing your own face clearly. Kenji looked down at his hands. They were just his hands. Not graceful like one monk's or strong like another's. Just his own hands. And somehow, for the first time, that felt like enough. Kenji's story about the masks touches something many of us struggle with. We spend so much energy trying to be what we think we should be that we lose touch with what we actually are. This happens in countless ways. We watch how others handle stress and try to copy their methods, even if those methods do not fit our nature. We see someone else's peaceful demeanor and force ourselves into a calmness that feels fake. We adopt ways of speaking, moving, thinking that belong to others, hoping that if we imitate them well enough, we will finally feel right. But as Kenji discovered, this just makes us feel more lost. Every mask we put on covers our real face a little more. And the real face underneath, our actual nature, is what needs to be seen and accepted if we want genuine peace. The wisdom of Zen Buddhism teaches that your true nature is already complete. It does not need to be created or achieved or earned. It just needs to be uncovered. All the masks you have been wearing, all the ways you have tried to be someone else, these are covering something that was already whole. Think about the master's question to Kenji about childhood. He did not ask what Kenji accomplished or achieved as a child. He asked what Kenji loved to do before he started monitoring himself. Before he started comparing himself to others. Before he learned to wear masks. Most of us had moments in childhood when we were simply ourselves without thought or effort. We laughed when things were funny. We cried when things hurt. We ran when we felt like running and sat still when we felt like sitting. We did not analyze whether we were doing it right. We just did it. That quality, not the specific activities, but the quality of unself-conscious being, is what Zen points to. Your true nature is not something you need to develop. It is something you need to stop covering up. This matters deeply for sleep because pretending is exhausting. When you spend all day trying to be someone you are not, maintaining a version of yourself that does not match your actual nature, you create enormous internal tension. That tension does not simply disappear when you lie down at night. Many people find that when they finally stop for the day, all the energy they spent pretending comes crashing down as anxiety or restlessness. The real self that was covered all day starts pushing back. The masks become uncomfortable, and the mind gets busy trying to figure out how to keep everything together. But what if you did not need to keep it together? What if, like Kenji taking off those wooden masks, you could let yourself be as you actually are? This does not mean acting without consideration for others. It does not mean being rude or selfish or refusing to adapt to different situations. The bamboo shoot grows into a bamboo stalk, not a pine tree, but it still bends in the wind. Being yourself includes wisdom about when to speak and when to be quiet, when to act and when to wait. What it means is stopping the exhausting work of pretending to be fundamentally different than you are. You do not need to force yourself into someone else's idea of peace. You do not need to adopt personality traits that do not fit you. You do not need to be calm in the specific way someone else is calm, or wise in the way someone else is wise. You just need to be you, more fully and honestly. The master made an important distinction about growth versus pretending. Growth happens naturally, like bamboo growing taller. Pretending is forced, like trying to make bamboo into pine. One flows from your nature. The other fights against it. As you settle into rest tonight, consider what masks you might be wearing. What ways of being have you adopted that do not actually fit you? What version of yourself are you maintaining that takes constant effort? You do not need to figure this all out right now. You do not need to make big changes immediately. Just notice. Just become aware of where you are pretending and where you are being authentic. And then, as much as you can, let the masks slip off. Let yourself be as you are, even if just for these hours of sleep. You do not need to perform for anyone while you rest. You do not need to maintain any particular image. You can just be your actual self, tired and human and imperfect. That self, the one underneath all the masks, is the one who needs rest tonight. Not the polished version you show the world. Not the person you think you should be. Just you, as you actually are. And that you is already enough. Has always been enough. Will always be enough, no matter how many masks you have worn or how long you have worn them. The path to peace begins with seeing your own face clearly. Tonight, let yourself see it. Let yourself be it. Let the masks fall away, at least for now, and rest in your own true nature. A few days later, Kenji prepared to leave the temple and return home. He felt he had learned important things. But on his last morning, as he was packing his few belongings, he heard shouting from outside. He ran out to find a young monk standing at the edge of the temple grounds, frozen in fear. The monk had been walking along a narrow log that served as a bridge over a steep ravine. He had made it halfway across, but now he stood completely still, unable to move forward or back. Other monks called encouragement to him, but the young monk just stood there, trembling. The master appeared beside Kenji. "He has done this crossing many times," the master said quietly. But today, fear found him in the middle. "What will happen?" Kenji asked. "He will eventually move. Fear cannot hold you forever. But watch what fear does while it has him." Kenji watched. The young monk's whole body was tense. His hands gripped the log so hard, his knuckles were white. His breathing came fast and shallow. Even from a distance, Kenji could see he was shaking. After what felt like a very long time, the young monk took a single step. Then another. Slowly, carefully, he made it across. When he reached solid ground, he collapsed, exhausted from the fear, even though the actual crossing had been short. The master called Kenji over to sit with him under a tree. "Have you noticed the birds here?" he asked. Kenji looked up. Several birds hopped from branch to branch in the trees above them. They moved quickly, easily, launching themselves across gaps without hesitation. "They just jump," Kenji said. "They do not think about it." "Do you think they never fall?" the master asked. "They probably do sometimes." "Yes. But they do not stop jumping because falling is possible. They trust their wings. They trust their ability to catch themselves. They trust the air and the branches and their own nature." The master picked up a seed from the ground. "This seed will become a tree if it finds the right soil. Does the seed worry about whether it can do this?" "No. Seeds do not worry. because they trust the process. They do not know they will definitely become trees. Many seeds do not. But they do not refuse to try because success is uncertain. Kenji thought about the young monk on the log. He could not trust. That is why he froze. He could not trust his feet to find the next step. Could not trust the log to hold him. Could not trust himself to reach the other side. So fear filled the space where trust should have been. The master stood and gestured for Kenji to follow. They walked to a part of the temple grounds where large stones created a path across a shallow stream. The stones were spaced just far enough apart that you had to step with intention to cross. "Cross this," the master said. Kenji looked at the stones. The gaps between them were small. The water was shallow. He could see the bottom clearly. This was easy. He stepped from stone to stone quickly, barely thinking about it. When he reached the other side, he turned back. "Now cross it again," the master said. "But this time, stop on each stone and examine it. Check if it is stable. Consider whether the next stone is too far. Think about what happens if you slip." Kenji stepped onto the first stone and did as the master instructed. He stopped and tested the stone under his foot. It wobbled slightly. He examined the gap to the next stone. It looked farther than he remembered. He thought about his feet slipping on wet stone. By the time he reached the third stone, his heart was beating faster. His movements were stiff and uncertain. The crossing that had been easy moments before now felt dangerous. When he finally reached the master's side again, he was breathing hard. "What was different?" the master asked. "When I thought about it too much, it became difficult. When I just did it, it was easy." The master nodded. This is what happens when thinking replaces trust. The young monk has crossed that log many times without trouble. But today, he stopped trusting his feet and started thinking about all the ways it could go wrong. His thinking made the crossing harder, not safer. They sat down beside the stream. Kenji watched the water flow over and around the stones, never hesitating, never stopping to worry about the path. "How do you develop trust?" Kenji asked. The monk knew he had crossed before, but that knowledge did not help him today. "Trust is not the same as knowledge," the master said. "You can know something with your mind, but not trust it with your being. Knowledge says, 'I have done this before.' Trust says, 'I can do it now.'" He picked up a leaf that had fallen on the ground. "When this leaf fell from the tree, did it know where it would land?" "No." "Did that stop it from falling?" "No." It trusted the fall itself. Not because it knew the outcome, but because falling is its nature. When it is time to fall, leaves fall. He released the leaf. A small breeze carried it away, tumbling through the air. "You are the same," the master continued. "You will face many crossings in your life. Moments when you cannot see the outcome clearly. Moments when thinking about all that could go wrong will freeze you in place. In those moments, you must trust something deeper than thought." "But what if I fail? What if I fall?" The master smiled. "Then you will learn how to catch yourself. Or you will learn that falling is not the end. Or you will learn something else unexpected. But you will not learn anything by standing still, frozen in fear." Kenji looked at the stones in the stream. So trust is not about knowing everything will work out. It is about moving forward even when you do not know. Yes, trust is taking the next step because staying still is not an option. Trust is using your ability right now, not waiting until you are certain of every future moment. A bird landed on a branch above them, then immediately launched itself to another tree. No hesitation, no visible thought, just movement, clean and certain. "The bird does not think I trust I can make this jump," the master said. "It just jumps." Trust is not a thought. It is an action. You learn trust by doing the thing, not by thinking about doing the thing. Kenji understood something then. He had been waiting to feel certain before he trusted. Waiting to know everything would work out. Waiting for fear to disappear completely. But that was backwards. Trust came through action, not before it. "Go back to your village," the master said. "You will face many streams to cross and logs to walk. Each time, you can stand frozen, thinking of all that might go wrong. Or you can trust your next step and take it. Not because you know what will happen, but because moving is how you learn what you are capable of." Kenji stood. He looked at the stones one more time. Then, without thinking about it, he crossed back over the stream. Quick, easy, natural. On the other side, he bowed to the master. "Thank you," he said. The master bowed back. "Trust yourself, Kenji. Not someday when you have figured everything out. Right now. You are ready." Kenji left the temple that day feeling different. Not because all his fears were gone, but because he understood he did not need to wait for them to disappear before he could move forward. This second story reveals something crucial about how fear works. The young monk had crossed that log many times safely. He knew how to do it. But in the moment when fear arrived, all his past experience meant nothing. Thinking replaced trust, and thinking paralyzed him. This is what happens to so many of us, especially at night. We have handled difficult things before. We have survived challenges. We have made it through uncertain times. But when fear arrives, it makes us forget all of that. Instead of trusting our capability, we start thinking about everything that could go wrong. The master showed Kenji this directly with the stones in the stream. The first crossing was easy because Kenji just did it. The second crossing became difficult because he stopped to analyze and worry about each step. The stones did not change. The water did not get deeper. But his experience changed completely because he replaced action with overthinking. Zen Buddhism recognizes thinking as both a gift and a trap. Thinking helps us plan and learn and understand. But thinking can also keep us locked in place, unable to move forward, questioning everything until we are frozen with uncertainty. The bird provides the perfect contrast. Birds do not think themselves across gaps between branches. They just jump. Not because they are certain they will make it every time. Sometimes birds do miscalculate and have to catch themselves mid-flight. But they do not let the possibility of missing their landing keep them from jumping. They trust their wings. They trust their instincts. They trust the air. And most importantly, they trust themselves to handle whatever happens, even if it is not perfect. The Master's distinction between knowledge and trust cuts to the heart of this. You can know intellectually that you are capable. You can have evidence from past experience. But if you do not trust yourself in the present moment, that knowledge will not help you. Trust is not a thought you have. It is an action you take. You build trust by doing things, not by thinking about doing things. Each time you take a step despite uncertainty, each time you jump despite not being certain of the landing, you develop more trust in yourself. This matters profoundly for sleep. How many nights do you lie awake overthinking, analyzing problems from every angle, considering every possible outcome, trying to think your way to certainty before you can rest? But as Kenji discovered, that approach makes things harder, not easier. When he just crossed the stones naturally, it was simple. When he stopped to worry about each step, the crossing became difficult and anxiety-producing. Your mind at night often does the same thing. It takes situations you could probably handle and makes them feel impossible by examining every detail, every risk, every way things could go wrong. It replaces trust with thinking, and thinking creates fear. The leaf falling from the tree shows another aspect of trust. The leaf does not know where it will land, but it falls anyway when the time comes. It trusts the process itself, not because it controls the outcome, but because falling is what leaves do. You are like that leaf in many ways. You do not control all outcomes. You cannot see the future. You cannot guarantee everything will work perfectly, but you can trust yourself to handle what comes. You can trust that you have survived everything life has brought you so far. You can trust that you will find a way through whatever arrives next. This is not blind optimism. It is not pretending problems do not exist. It is simply recognizing that overthinking problems does not solve them and often makes them worse. The young monk's fear did not make the log safer. Kenji's worrying about the stones did not improve his crossing. Your nighttime anxiety does not prepare you better for tomorrow's challenges. What does help is trust. Trust that you will take the next step when it is time. Trust that you have capabilities you can rely on. Trust that you do not need to figure out every future moment before you can rest now. The Master's final words to Kenji are important. He did not say, "Trust yourself once you have overcome all your fears." He said, "Trust yourself right now. You are ready." You do not need to wait until you are fearless to start trusting yourself. You do not need to have everything figured out. You do not need certainty about outcomes. You just need to take the next step. And right now, that step is rest. You do not need to solve everything tonight. You do not need to think through every possibility. You do not need to make yourself certain about uncertain things. You just need to trust that you can handle tomorrow when tomorrow comes. Trust that your mind and body know how to rest. Trust that lying down and releasing effort is enough. Like the bird jumping between branches, you do not need to understand exactly how it works. You just need to do it. Like the leaf falling from the tree, you do not need to control where you land. You just need to let go. Trust is not something you think your way into. It is something you practice by taking action despite uncertainty. And the action you can take right now is to stop thinking and start trusting. Trust that you have done enough for today. Trust that tomorrow will bring its own wisdom. Trust that you are capable of handling what comes. Trust that you can rest now without having everything resolved. That trust, simple as it sounds, is what allows you to cross from waking to sleeping. Not perfect knowledge, not complete certainty. Just trust in your next step and the next until you find yourself on the other side, resting deeply. After leaving the temple, Kenji returned to his village and resumed his work as a merchant. He traveled between towns buying and selling cloth just as he had before. But he noticed things differently now. The lessons from the master stayed with him, changing how he saw the world. One thing had not changed though. His neighbor, an elderly woman named Yuki who lived in the house beside his, still never spoke to him. This had been true for the 3 years Kenji had lived there. He would greet her each morning when they both stepped outside. She would nod slightly but say nothing. He would ask about her day. She would turn away without answering. At first, Kenji had tried to be friendly, but after months of silence, he began to create a story. She must think I am too young and foolish. She probably disapproves of how I run my business. Maybe she finds me loud or annoying. Whatever the reason, her silence felt like judgment. The story grew stronger over time. Kenji began to avoid looking at her house. When his other neighbors mentioned Yuki, he would change the subject. He felt a tightness in his chest each morning when he saw her tending her small garden, silent and disapproving. One afternoon, a sudden storm came through the village. Heavy winds tore at roofs and knocked over anything not secured. Kenji rushed to tie down his cart and cover his cloth. The wind was strong, and he struggled alone. Then someone was beside him, holding down the tarp while he worked to secure it. He looked over and saw Yuki. Together, they saved his cloth from the rain. When the worst of the storm passed, Kenji turned to thank her. She smiled at him. It was a genuine smile, warm and kind. "Thank you," Kenji said. "I thought you did not like me." Yuki looked confused. "Not like you? Why would I think that? You never speak to me. In 3 years, you have barely said a word." Understanding came over her face. "Ah, my hearing is very bad. I lost most of it many years ago. I can see your lips move, but I cannot make out the words unless someone is very close and speaking loudly. I thought you were just being polite with your greetings. I did not know you wanted real conversation." Kenji felt something crumble inside him. 3 years of believing she judged him. 3 years of that tight feeling in his chest. And all of it based on a story he had invented. "I am sorry," he said. "I should have asked." "And I should have explained," she replied. "We both made assumptions." From that day on, Kenji and Yuki became friends. She taught him about the medicinal plants she grew. He helped her carry water from the well. They would stand close and speak loudly so she could hear, and people walking by would think they were arguing when they were just having normal conversations. But Kenji never forgot the lesson. He had spent 3 years suffering over something that existed only in his mind. Yuki's silence was just silence. Everything else, all the meaning he had given it, he had created himself. A few weeks later, Kenji met a new merchant at the market. The man sold spices and seemed interesting. Kenji tried to be friendly, but the merchant always appeared rushed. He would cut conversations short and turn away quickly. Kenji felt the familiar tightness beginning in his chest. This man does not like me either. But then he remembered Yuki. He remembered how completely wrong his story had been. Instead of building another tale of rejection, Kenji just wondered. Maybe the merchant is busy with something. Maybe he is worried about his new business. Maybe he is naturally quiet. Maybe 100 other things I cannot see. Kenji did not know. And he realized that not knowing was better than creating a painful story that might not be true. One evening, the spice merchant approached Kenji as he was closing his stall. "Forgive me for being so distant," the man said. "My wife is very ill. I rush home each day to care for her. I know I must seem unfriendly, but it is not about you at all." Kenji smiled. "I understand. Is there anything I can do to help?" They talked for a while. The merchant's wife needed certain herbs. Kenji connected him with Yuki, who prepared medicine that helped. The merchant was deeply grateful. He and Kenji became friends. Walking home that night, Kenji thought about all the stories he had told himself over the years. How many times had he taken someone's silence or distraction or brief reply and turned it into evidence they disliked him? How much suffering he had created over stories that existed only in his own mind. The truth was usually simpler than his stories. Most people were not thinking about him at all. They were dealing with their own lives, their own worries, their own struggles. Their behavior had little to do with him. This brought relief. If he had been making up painful stories, he could stop. He could simply not know what others were thinking. And that uncertainty was far more peaceful than the certain suffering his stories had created. Kenji's experience with Yuki shows us something we all do. Someone acts in a way we do not understand, and immediately we create a story to explain it. Usually, the story involves us falling short, or being judged, or not being good enough. Yuki's silence became proof she disliked Kenji. But her silence was just silence. Everything else was his invention. He took a neutral fact and wrapped it in painful meaning that he carried for 3 years. Think about the energy Kenji spent on that story. Every morning feeling that tightness in his chest. Every interaction filtered through his belief that she disapproved. Every opportunity for friendship lost because he was protecting himself from a threat that did not exist. We do this constantly. Someone does not respond to a message quickly, and we decide they are angry. A friend seems distracted, and we conclude they are tired of us. A colleague is brief, and we take it as rejection. Our minds are story-making machines, constantly creating narratives to explain what we observe. The problem is not that we make stories. The problem is we believe them without question. We take our interpretations as facts. We suffer over things that might not be true at all. Zen Buddhism teaches us to hold our stories lightly. Yes, the mind will create narratives. That is what minds do. But we do not have to believe every story. We can recognize that our interpretation is just one possibility among many. Kenji learned to ask a simple question when he started creating a painful story. What else could be true? This question opened up space. Instead of one certain explanation that caused suffering, there were many possible explanations, most having nothing to do with him. For those struggling with sleep, this teaching is vital. How many nights do you lie awake replaying conversations, convinced you know what they meant? How often does your mind tell you stories about what others think, stories that feel absolutely true in the dark, But what if those stories are like Kenji's story about Yuki? What if you are creating suffering over interpretations that are not accurate? What if the truth is simpler and less personal than your anxious mind suggests? The spice merchant's situation shows this clearly. Kenji could have created another painful story. Instead, he stayed with uncertainty. And when he learned the truth, it had nothing to do with him. The merchant was worried about his sick wife. His brief interactions were about his own circumstances. Most of what happens around you is not about you. This can feel uncomfortable because we want to understand how others see us. But it is also deeply freeing. If people's behavior is mostly about their own lives, then you can stop taking everything personally. Tonight, notice what stories your mind is telling. Notice how it takes facts and wraps them in interpretations. Someone said something in a certain tone. That is a fact. What it meant, whether they were judging you, whether they were upset, all of that is story. You do not have to believe the story. You can acknowledge you do not know. And not knowing is much more peaceful than suffering over a painful story that might not be true. Some months after settling back into village life, Kenji found himself struggling again. His business was not going well. Several deals had fallen through. A shipment of cloth had been damaged by rain. Everything felt difficult. One day, needing time away from the village, he walked to a canyon known for its remarkable echoes. People said sounds would bounce off the canyon walls and return, sometimes even louder than the original call. Kenji stood at the edge, frustrated with how his life was going. Without really thinking, he shouted into the canyon. Nothing ever goes right. The canyon echoed back immediately. Nothing ever goes right. Hearing his own bitterness returned so clearly startled him. It sounded harsh, angry. He had not realized he was carrying so much bitterness inside. He tried again. Everything is against me. The echo came back. Everything is against me. Kenji sat down on a rock. The echo was honest. It just returned exactly what he sent in. And what he was sending out into the world was bitter and angry. An old man who lived in a small hut near the canyon approached. Kenji had seen him before on his walks. "The canyon is honest," the old man said, settling onto a nearby stone. "It gives back what it receives." "I have had difficult times," Kenji said defensively. "I am sure. But tell me, when you speak to people in your village, do you speak the way you just spoke into the canyon?" Kenji thought about it. When he talked to other merchants, he complained about business. When he spoke to neighbors, he pointed out problems. When customers asked questions, he was often short with them, impatient. "I suppose I do," he admitted. "And how do people respond to you?" Kenji had to acknowledge that people were not particularly warm lately. They did not seek his company. They did not ask his advice. They kept their distance. "Try something," the old man suggested. "Call something different into the canyon." Kenji felt foolish, but he stood and called out, "I am grateful for this day." The echo returned. "I am grateful for this day." It sounded strange to hear those words in his own voice. He could not remember the last time he had expressed gratitude aloud. The old man smiled. The canyon does not judge what you send in. It just returns it. People are much the same. What you put out into the world comes back to you. Not always immediately. Not always, obviously. But over time, the bitterness you send returns as bitterness. The kindness you send returns as kindness. Kenji walked home thinking about this. He thought about how he had been treating people lately. Short answers. Complaints. Criticism. No wonder people were keeping their distance. That evening, he decided to try something different. When his neighbor asked how his day was, instead of listing everything that went wrong, Kenji said, "It had its challenges, but I am glad to be home now." "How was your day?" The neighbor looked surprised, then smiled, and actually talked for a while. It was the first real conversation they had had in weeks. The next day at the market, when a customer hesitated over a piece of cloth, instead of showing impatience, Kenji said, "Take your time. It is an important decision." The customer relaxed and ended up buying more than they had planned. When another merchant mentioned struggling with slow sales, instead of complaining about his own problems, Kenji asked questions and listened. The merchant seemed grateful just to be heard. Small changes. But over the following weeks, Kenji noticed something shifting. People were friendlier to him. They sought his company more. His business began to improve, not because market conditions changed, but because customers felt better about buying from him. He was sending something different out, and something different was coming back. One afternoon, he returned to the canyon. This time, he stood at the edge and called out, "I am learning to trust life." The echo returned clearly. "I am learning to trust life." The old man appeared again, as if he had been waiting. "Better?" he asked. "Much better," Kenji said. "I understand now. The world is not against me. I was against the world, and it reflected that back." The old man nodded. Most people spend their lives wondering why others treat them poorly, never looking at what they are putting out. You learned young. That is fortunate. Kenji thought about all the times he had been certain life was unfair, certain people were against him. But he had been creating much of what he was experiencing through the energy he sent out. "It is not that problems do not exist," Kenji said slowly, working through his understanding. "My shipment really was damaged. Those deals really did fall through. But how I responded to those problems created more of what I did not want." "Yes," the old man said. "You cannot control everything that happens. But you can control what you send back out into the world. That is the only control you really have. And it is more powerful than you think." Kenji visited the canyon a few more times over the following months, always listening to what the echo returned. It became a way of checking himself, of noticing what he was putting out into the world. Sometimes the echo revealed bitterness he had not realized he was carrying. Sometimes it showed him impatience or judgment. And sometimes, when things were going well, it reflected back gratitude and peace. The canyon never lied. It was always honest about what he sent in. And slowly, Kenji learned to send out more of what he wanted to receive back. The canyon's echo teaches a profound truth. What you send out into the world has a way of coming back to you. Not in some mystical way necessarily, but in the very practical way that Kenji discovered. When you approach life with bitterness, people respond to that bitterness. When you speak with criticism, others become defensive or critical in return. When you send out suspicion, You create relationships where trust cannot grow. The world reflects back what you give it. This is not about blame. Kenji had real difficulties. His shipment was damaged. Deals fell through. His pain was real. But the way he responded to that pain, the bitterness and anger he sent out, created more of what he did not want. Think about how this works. When you are short with someone, they usually become less friendly. When you complain constantly, people start avoiding you. When you criticize others, they become defensive and less open. You create the very experiences you are reacting against. Kenji noticed this pattern when he started changing what he sent out. Small shifts in how he spoke to people, how he responded to difficulties, how he treated daily interactions. And those small shifts created different responses from others. This teaching matters for sleep because we often lie awake replaying conflicts and hurts. We think about how others wronged us. We rehearse arguments where we prove we were right. We catalogue all the ways life has been unfair. But while you are sending those bitter thoughts through your mind, what are you creating in yourself? What are you preparing to send out tomorrow? Your nighttime thoughts are not separate from your daytime experiences. They are connected. The bitterness you rehearse at night becomes the bitterness you carry into the next day. The canyon does not judge. It just returns what it receives. Life works similarly. Not perfectly, not immediately, but over time, the energy you put out shapes the energy that comes back to you. This does not mean bad things only happen to people who deserve them. That is not what this teaching says. Difficult things happen to everyone. But your response to those difficult things creates ripples that spread outward and eventually come back. Kenji learned he could not control his shipment being damaged. But he could control whether he responded with bitterness that pushed people away or with acceptance that kept relationships open. He could not control market conditions, but he could control whether he was pleasant or unpleasant to work with. The old man's wisdom was simple. You cannot control everything that happens, but you can control what you send back out. That is your real power. As you prepare for rest tonight, consider what you have been sending out. Not to judge yourself, but just to notice. Have you been approaching life with openness or suspicion? With gratitude or complaint? With kindness or criticism? Whatever you have been sending, you can send something different starting now. You do not need to wait for circumstances to improve. You do not need others to change first. You can simply begin putting out what you want to receive back. This might feel risky. Why should I be kind when others have been unkind to me? Why should I be open when life has been hard? But remember the canyon. It does not wait for you to send kind words before it echoes kindly. It simply returns what you give it. The same is true of life. It will return what you send. So send what you want to receive. Send it even when it feels difficult. Send it especially when it feels difficult. That is when it matters most. Let your mind rest tonight knowing that tomorrow is a chance to send something new into the world. You are not trapped by yesterday's bitterness or last week's anger. Each morning, you can stand at the edge of the canyon and choose what to call out. Choose words you would be glad to hear echoed back. Choose energy you would welcome receiving. Choose thoughts that would bring peace if they return to you amplified. The canyon is always honest. Life is always listening. the hills above his village, there lived an old gardener known for growing the most beautiful flowers anyone had seen. Kenji had heard about this man and decided to visit him one spring morning, hoping to learn the secret of such beauty. He found the gardener sitting on a wooden bench in the middle of his garden. The man was simply sitting there, doing nothing. Flowers bloomed all around him in brilliant colors. The air smelled sweet. Bees moved from blossom to blossom. Kenji approached and bowed. "Master Gardener, I have come to learn from you. Will you teach me your techniques?" The old gardener looked up and smiled. "Sit with me." Kenji sat on the bench, waiting for instruction. The gardener said nothing. He just looked at the flowers. After several minutes, Kenji grew restless. "What should I be learning?" he asked. "Watch the flowers," the gardener said. Kenji watched. He saw flowers swaying in the breeze. He saw butterflies landing on petals. He saw nothing particularly instructive. But what is the technique? Kenji pressed. "How do you make them grow so well? What is your secret method?" The gardener chuckled softly. "I am showing you." Kenji felt frustrated. He had come all this way to learn, and the old man was just sitting here. This felt like a waste of time. He had work to do back in the village, things to accomplish, problems to solve. "Forgive me," Kenji said, trying to keep his voice respectful, "but we are just sitting. I do not understand what I am supposed to be learning." The gardener pointed to a rose bush nearby. "Does that rose try to bloom?" Kenji looked at the rose. "No, it just blooms." "Does it force its petals open?" "No." "Does it worry about blooming correctly or compare itself to other roses?" "No, it just grows naturally." The gardener nodded. "And yet, see how beautiful it is. The rose does not try to be beautiful. It does not work hard to bloom. It simply receives sunlight and water, and beauty emerges without effort." Kenji looked around at all the flowers. "But surely you must work hard. You must water them, tend the soil, pull weeds." "Yes," the gardener agreed. "I create conditions for growth. But I do not make the flowers bloom. I cannot force beauty to happen. I can only prepare the ground and then allow nature to do what nature does." He stood slowly and walked to a patch where new seeds had been planted. The soil was bare. "I planted these 3 days ago. If I dig them up to check if they are growing, what would happen?" "You would damage them," Kenji said. "Yes. So instead, I trust. I water the soil. I protect the patch from being trampled. And I wait. The seeds know how to become flowers. They do not need me to make them grow. They need me to stop interfering." Kenji felt something shift in his understanding. He thought about how he approached everything in his life. Always pushing, always trying to force results, always worried that nothing would happen unless he made it happen. The gardener sat back down. "You came here wanting me to give you techniques. But the secret is not in doing more. It is in doing less. In creating the right conditions and then trusting what wants to happen naturally." They sat together in silence. At first, Kenji's mind was still busy, still wanting to do something productive. But gradually, as the minutes passed, something in him began to settle. He noticed details he had missed before. The way light fell on the petals, the sound of wind through leaves, the feeling of warmth on his skin. He was not accomplishing anything. He was not learning techniques. He was just sitting. And somehow, this felt more valuable than all the instruction he had expected. When you return to your village, the gardener said after a long while, you will face many tasks. Your mind will tell you that success requires constant effort and control. But remember these flowers. They achieve beauty without forcing. They bloom without anxiety. They trust the process that moves through them. Kenji stayed in the garden until late afternoon. He helped the gardener water some plants, but mostly he just sat and watched things grow in their own time. No forcing, no rushing, just allowing. When he finally left to return home, he felt different. Lighter somehow. Less burdened by the need to make everything happen through sheer will. A few weeks after visiting the gardener, Kenji found himself struggling again with his business. He was working harder than ever, but results were not coming. He would wake early and go to bed late, trying to control every detail, pushing to make sales happen. One hot afternoon, exhausted and frustrated, he walked to the river to cool off. He found a quiet spot under a willow tree and sat watching the water flow. An older merchant he knew slightly was sitting nearby, dangling his feet in the water. The man's name was Ren, and people said he had been very successful before retiring. "You look tired, young Kenji," Ren called over. Kenji moved closer. "I am. I work all day, every day, but nothing seems to move forward." Ren smiled. "Come, put your feet in the water. It helps." Kenji sat beside him and put his feet in the cool water. The river flowed around his ankles, constant and soothing. "Watch what I do," Ren said. He cupped his hands together tightly and plunged them into the river, trying to scoop up water. When he lifted his hands, water poured out between his fingers. By the time his hands reached his lap, they were nearly empty. "That is what your working looks like right now," Ren said. "All effort, little result." "But I have to try," Kenji protested. "If I do not work hard, nothing will happen." "Try again, but differently." Ren held his hands open and relaxed, palms up, just under the water's surface. Water filled his palms naturally. He lifted his hands slowly, gently, and the water stayed, pooled in the curves of his open hands. "Same river. Different approach," Ren said. He poured the water back. "One way involves force and losing what you want. The other involves openness and receiving what comes naturally." Kenji looked at his own hands. He had been clenching everything so tightly. His business, his plans, his need for success, just like those closed fists trying to capture water. "But how do I be more open?" he asked. "How do I stop trying so hard when trying is all I know?" Ren gestured at the river. "Does the river try to flow?" "No." "Does it work hard to reach the sea?" "No, it just flows naturally. And yet it gets there. Every drop eventually reaches the ocean. Not because the river pushes and forces, but because it follows the path of least resistance. It moves around obstacles. It allows the earth to guide it. It trusts the natural movement." Kenji watched the river. It did seem effortless. Even when it met rocks or fallen branches, the water simply flowed around them. No struggle, no forcing, just constant, natural movement. "I think I've been like those rocks," Kenji said slowly, "trying to make the water go where I want instead of moving with it." Ren laughed. "Yes. And how well does that work for rocks? The water goes around them. They cannot control it. They just get wet and worn down by fighting what they cannot change." They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Kenji felt the water flowing past his feet. Cool, constant, utterly without effort. "Tell me about your business," Ren said finally. "What are you trying so hard to control?" Kenji explained. He was trying to force customers to buy, pushing hard to close deals, working late into the night planning strategies, worrying constantly about competition. "And how do customers respond to all this pushing?" Ren asked. Kenji had to admit they often seemed uncomfortable. Some avoided him now. Others made excuses and left quickly. His desperate energy was probably pushing them away. "What if you tried the open hands approach?" Ren suggested. "Instead of trying to capture customers, what if you simply offered value and allowed them to come naturally?" "That sounds like doing nothing," Kenji said. "Is this doing nothing?" Ren gestured at his open hands, still resting in the water. "I am present. I am positioned correctly. I am open and ready. But I am not forcing. There is a difference between doing nothing and allowing things to happen naturally." Kenji thought about this. "So I still show up. I still do my work. But I stop trying to force results?" "Exactly. You create conditions. You position yourself well. You offer quality. And then you trust that the right customers will come. You allow the natural flow instead of fighting against it." Over the following weeks, Kenji experimented with this approach. When customers came to his stall, instead of pushing them to buy, he simply showed them cloth and answered their questions. When they hesitated, he gave them space instead of pressuring them. When they left without buying, he did not chase them. At first, this felt wrong, like he was being too passive. But gradually, he noticed something changing. Customers seemed more comfortable around him. They started returning more often. They brought friends. His business actually began to improve. He was working less hard but getting better results. Not by forcing, but by allowing. Not by grasping, but by offering with open hands. One day, he returned to the river and found Ren there again. "The open hands approach is working," Kenji said, sitting down beside him. Ren smiled. "Of course it is. The river has known this secret forever. It reaches the sea not by trying, but by allowing the natural movement to carry it forward." Ren's demonstration with the water shows something most of us need to learn. Grasping and forcing often cause us to lose what we want, while openness and allowing help us receive what we need. Think about those closed fists trying to hold water. All that effort, all that trying, and the water escapes anyway. The harder you squeeze, the less you retain. This is not because you are not trying hard enough. It is because the approach itself is wrong. Open hands held gently allow water to pool naturally. Less effort, better results. This is not about being passive or giving up. Ren still had to position his hands correctly. He still had to be present and attentive, but he was not forcing. The river provides the perfect metaphor. It flows constantly toward the sea, but it never tries to get there. It does not push or force or worry. It simply moves naturally, following the path of least resistance, trusting the process. And every drop eventually arrives. Your life has a natural flow too. There are things trying to come to you, opportunities trying to reach you, connections wanting to form. But if you are always grasping and forcing, you block that natural flow. You become like those rocks in the river, trying to control the water instead of moving with it. Think about what you are grasping as you try to sleep. Are you holding tightly to worries, trying to solve them before you can rest? Are you squeezing problems, attempting to control what tomorrow will bring? Are you clenching at the day that passed, unable to let it go? All that grasping prevents the natural flow. Sleep is trying to reach you, but your closed fists are keeping it away. What if you tried Ren's approach? Open your hands. Not literally, though you can do that too. But, metaphorically, open your grip on whatever you are trying to control. Let worries be worries without trying to solve them all tonight. Let problems be problems without trying to fix them all right now. Let the day that passed flow away like water returning to the river. This is not giving up. It is not being irresponsible. It is recognizing that some things cannot be forced. Some things can only be received. And receiving requires open hands, not clenched fists. Ren's success in business came from this understanding. He offered value with open hands and let customers come naturally. He did not chase or force. He trusted the flow, and the flow brought him what he needed. You can do the same with sleep. Offer your body rest with open hands. Create comfortable conditions. Lie down with willingness, and then release your grip. Stop trying to make it happen. Let sleep come to you naturally, the way water fills open palms. The river does not try to reach the sea. It just flows, moment by moment, trusting the natural movement. You do not need to try to reach sleep. You just need to flow with the natural process that your body already knows. Tonight, as you settle into rest, practice this release. Notice where you are grasping. Feel where your hands are clenched, literally or metaphorically. And then, gently, open them. Let whatever you are holding flow back to the river. Let your worries return to tomorrow where they belong. Let your problems rest while you rest. Open hands, open heart, open to receiving what wants to come naturally. This is not weakness. This is wisdom. The river has always known it. The water has always taught it. Now it is your turn to learn. Receive sleep tonight. Do not chase it. Do not force it. Just open your hands and let it pool naturally in the curves of your gentle allowing. On a bright morning in early summer, Kenji decided to explore a new area beyond the eastern hills. He had heard about a hot spring there and thought the walk would do him good. The day was clear, perfect for wandering. He set off with energy, enjoying the freedom of having no particular schedule. He climbed through forests, crossed streams, discovered hidden meadows. Hours passed. The landscape was beautiful, and Kenji felt alive with the adventure of it. But as afternoon came, he realized he had no idea where he was. The landmarks looked unfamiliar. The paths seemed to lead in circles. He had been so caught up in exploring that he had not paid attention to his route. He kept walking, sure he would find his way. His legs began to ache. His stomach growled. The sun moved lower in the sky. Still, he pushed forward, determined to find the hot spring, or at least the way back home. By the time he finally stumbled onto a path he recognized, his body was exhausted. His feet had blisters. His throat was dry. He had ignored all the signs that he needed to stop and rest, too focused on his goal to listen to what his body was telling him. When he finally reached his village as the sun was setting, he went straight to the well and drank deeply. The water tasted better than anything he could remember. His body had been trying to tell him he needed water for hours, but he had ignored it. The next morning, still tired and sore, Kenji went to visit Yuki, his elderly neighbor. She was in her garden, and when she saw him limping, she gestured for him to sit. "What happened to you?" she asked loudly, sitting beside him. Kenji explained his adventure and how he had pushed himself too far. Yuki shook her head. "Your body tried to tell you to stop, but you did not listen." "I wanted to reach the hot spring," Kenji said. "I thought if I just kept going, I would find it." "Your mind wanted to reach the hot spring," Yuki corrected. "Your body was telling you something different. Which one do you think knows better what you need?" Kenji had never thought about it that way. "I always listen to my mind. That is where my thoughts are, where I make decisions." Yuki picked up a piece of fruit from a basket beside her. She held it out to him. "Smell this." Kenji leaned forward and smelled it. The fruit was rotten. He pulled back immediately. "That is bad." "How did you know?" "I just knew. My body told me." "Did you have to think about it? Did your mind need to analyze and decide?" "No. It was instant." Yuki set the rotten fruit aside and handed him a fresh one. "Now smell this." The fresh fruit smelled sweet and clean. Kenji's mouth watered immediately. "Your body knows what is good and what is not good," Yuki said. "It knows when you need water before your mind admits you are thirsty. It knows when you need rest before your mind will let you stop. It knows when food is rotten before your thoughts can explain why." She gestured at her garden. "I have been tending plants for many years. Do you know how I know when they need water? Not by counting days or following a schedule. I touch the soil. I look at the leaves. My body can feel when something is wrong, even before my mind understands what it is." Kenji looked at his blistered feet. "So, I should have stopped when my body first felt tired. Your body was trying to guide you. But your mind had a goal, and goals can make us deaf to wisdom that is quieter than thoughts." They sat in silence for a while. Kenji became aware of his body in a way he usually was not. He could feel the soreness in his legs, the slight hunger in his belly, the way his shoulders were tense. "I spend all my time in my head," he said quietly. "Making plans, solving problems, thinking about what I need to do. I barely notice my body unless something hurts badly enough to force me to pay attention." Yuki smiled. "Most people live that way. The mind is loud. The body is quiet. so we listen to the loud voice and ignore the quiet one. But the quiet one often knows more. Over the following weeks, Kenji practiced listening to his body. When he felt tired, he rested instead of pushing through. When he felt hungry, he ate instead of finishing just one more task. When his shoulders tensed, he noticed and relaxed them instead of ignoring the tightness until it became pain. It felt strange at first, almost like learning a new language. His body had been speaking to him his whole life, but he had never really listened. One day, he was working at his stall when he noticed a headache beginning. His old habit would have been to ignore it and keep working. But instead, he paused. He drank some water. He stepped into the shade for a few minutes. The headache faded before it could grow worse. Such a small thing. But it felt like a revelation. His body had warned him, and by listening, he had prevented suffering. Kenji's adventure taught him something many of us forget. The body holds wisdom that the thinking mind often ignores. We are so focused on our mental goals and plans that we stop hearing what our physical being is trying to tell us. Think about Yuki's lesson with the fruit. Kenji knew instantly that the rotten fruit was bad. He did not need to think about it or analyze it. His body simply knew. This kind of knowing is older and often more reliable than the thinking mind's conclusions. Your body is constantly communicating with you. It tells you when you need rest through subtle signals of fatigue. It tells you when you need nourishment through feelings of hunger. It tells you when something is wrong through sensations of discomfort or unease. But how often do you actually listen? Most of us live almost entirely in our heads. We make decisions based on what we think we should do, not on what our bodies are telling us we need. We push through tiredness because our minds say we should accomplish more. We ignore hunger because we are busy with mental tasks. We carry tension in our bodies for hours without noticing. The mind is loud and insistent. It creates plans and goals and demands. The body is quieter. It speaks through sensations, through subtle feelings, through gentle signals that are easy to miss if you are not paying attention. But as Yuki explained, the quiet voice often knows more. The body understands things the mind has not yet figured out. It senses what is healthy and unhealthy. It knows when you need to stop before your mind will admit it. It feels what is true before your thoughts can justify or explain it. Kenji spent hours ignoring his body's signals because his mind had a goal. He wanted to reach the hot spring. His thinking mind was focused on that destination, and everything else seemed less important. But his body knew he needed water, rest, and direction long before he finally acknowledged it. This pattern shows up in so many areas of life. We override our body's wisdom in pursuit of mental goals. We stay in situations that make us physically uncomfortable because our minds say we should. We push our bodies beyond healthy limits because our thoughts insist we must accomplish more. Learning to listen to the body is like learning a language you once knew but forgot. The body never stopped speaking. You just stopped listening. But the capacity to hear it again is always there. When Kenji began paying attention to his body's signals, small changes created significant relief. Noticing the beginning of a headache and responding to it prevented hours of pain. Recognizing true tiredness and allowing rest preserved his energy. Feeling tension and releasing it kept stress from accumulating. These practices seem simple, almost too simple to matter. But they represent a profound shift in how we relate to ourselves. Instead of treating the body as a tool that should obey the mind's commands, we begin to see it as a source of wisdom worth consulting. This does not mean the mind has no value. Thinking, planning, and analyzing all have their place. But they should not be the only voices we listen to. The body's quieter wisdom deserves equal attention. When you notice physical sensations, you are receiving information. Tightness in your chest might be telling you something makes you anxious. Tension in your jaw might indicate you are holding back words that need to be spoken. Heaviness in your limbs might signal you need rest more than you need to complete another task. These sensations are not obstacles to overcome or annoyances to ignore. They are guidance from a wise part of yourself that is always trying to help you move toward well-being. The peace that comes from listening to your body is different from the peace that comes from achieving goals. It is quieter, more sustainable, more rooted in what you actually need rather than what you think you should want. As you move through your day and evening, notice what your body is telling you. Not just the loud signals of pain or extreme hunger, but the quieter ones. The slight fatigue, the gentle tension, the subtle sense of comfort or discomfort in different situations. You do not have to act on every signal immediately. Just notice. Just listen. Begin to recognize that your body has wisdom worth hearing. Over time, this listening becomes natural and you find yourself moving through life with less struggle because you are working with your body's knowledge rather than against it. In the warmth of late summer, Kenji received a message from a wealthy merchant who wanted to discuss a large order. The message said the merchant would arrive at Kenji's stall sometime in the afternoon. Kenji should wait for him there. Kenji arrived at his stall early, excited about the potential business. He arranged his cloth displays perfectly. He made sure everything looked its best. Then he sat down to wait. The morning passed slowly. Customers came and went, but none of them were the wealthy merchant. Kenji kept glancing down the market road, watching for someone who might be his expected visitor. Noon came. Still no merchant. Kenji's excitement began to mix with frustration. The message had said afternoon, but when exactly? Should he have asked for a specific time? He tried to stay busy. He rearranged his cloth again, even though it did not need rearranging. He counted his inventory even though he already knew what he had. He swept around his stall even though it was already clean. But none of this helped. He was just filling time, and he knew it. The waiting felt empty, useless. All this time sitting here when he could be doing something productive. An older merchant at the next stall watched Kenji's fidgeting with amusement. Her name was Hana, and she had been working at this market longer than Kenji had been alive. "You are terrible at waiting," she called over. Kenji sighed. "I feel like I am wasting time. Just sitting here doing nothing while life passes by." Hana set down the basket she was weaving. "Come here. I want to show you something." Kenji walked over to her stall. She gestured at a row of small plants she kept in clay pots. "I planted these seeds 8 days ago. Do you see anything happening?" Kenji looked at the pots. The soil was dark and damp, but he saw no sprouts, no leaves, nothing growing. "They look empty." "Empty," Hana repeated. "That is what everyone sees. But tell me, are the seeds doing nothing? Well, no. They are growing under the soil. Exactly. Just because you cannot see the movement does not mean nothing is moving. The seeds are splitting open. Roots are pushing down. Shoots are preparing to push up. More is happening in that still soil than you can imagine. She looked at Kenji. Waiting is like this. It looks empty from the outside. But if you pay attention, you will find it is actually full of life. Kenji glanced back at his stall. But I am just sitting there. There is nothing to pay attention to. Is that true? Hana asked. Nothing at all? Kenji returned to his stall and sat down again. This time, instead of fidgeting and watching for the merchant, he tried to notice what was actually here. The warmth of sun on his shoulders. The smell of fresh bread from a stall nearby. The sound of people talking, laughing, bargaining. A child running past, chasing a dog. Shadows shifting as clouds moved overhead. He realized the market was alive with detail he usually missed because he was always thinking about what came next, what needed to be done, where he needed to go. Time felt different when he paid attention this way. Not empty and dragging, but rich and full. Each moment had texture and weight. He was not waiting for life to start when the merchant arrived. Life was already happening. The merchant finally came in late afternoon, apologizing for the delay. They discussed business. The deal was good. But what stayed with Kenji was not the successful transaction. It was what he had learned about waiting. A few weeks later, Kenji had another waiting experience. He needed to meet with a supplier who was traveling from a distant town. The supplier sent word that he would arrive by evening, but the roads were difficult and timing was uncertain. Kenji went to the edge of the village where the road came in. He brought a blanket and some food, expecting a long wait. But this time, he did not fight the waiting. He sat under a tree and let himself be present. He watched the road, but not anxiously. He ate his food slowly, tasting it. He listened to birds settling into evening songs. He felt the temperature cooling as the sun dropped lower. An old man came walking down the road and stopped when he saw Kenji. "Are you waiting for someone?" the old man asked. "Yes, a supplier who may arrive any time." The old man sat down nearby. Waiting is hard for most people. "It used to be hard for me too," Kenji said. "But I am learning that it is not empty time. There is life in the waiting itself." The old man smiled. "You have learned, young, what takes most people a lifetime to understand. We spend so much effort trying to make things happen that we forget to notice what is already happening." They sat together as the evening deepened. The supplier arrived just after dark, apologetic about the delay. But Kenji felt no frustration. The hours of waiting had not been wasted. They had been full of their own quiet richness. Kenji's struggle with waiting shows something most of us experience. We see waiting as empty time, as life paused, as nothing happening until the thing we are waiting for arrives. This makes waiting feel like suffering, like wasting precious moments we could be using for something productive. But Hana's seeds revealed a different truth. Just because you cannot see movement does not mean nothing is moving. Beneath still soil, enormous transformation is happening. The seed is doing the work of becoming a plant. That work is invisible but essential. When you are waiting, something similar might be occurring. Not always, but often. Your mind is processing experiences you have not yet fully understood. Your body is resting and restoring itself. Your nervous system is settling. Things are shifting and preparing beneath the surface of awareness. Even when nothing particular is being accomplished, life is still happening. The moment you are in is not empty just because it does not contain the thing you are waiting for. It contains everything else. The warmth of sun, the sound of voices, the movement of breath in your body, the feeling of being alive right now. We miss all of this when we are locked in impatient, waiting for the next thing. We treat the present moment as an obstacle to get through, something standing between us and what we actually want. But the present moment is not an obstacle. It is where life is actually happening. Kenji discovered this when he stopped fighting the wait and started paying attention to what was actually there. The market came alive with detail. Time felt different, not dragging but full. He was not killing time until the merchant arrived. He was living the time he had. This distinction matters deeply for finding peace. So much of our suffering comes from treating right now as insufficient, as something to endure until the better moment arrives. We wait for the weekend, for retirement, for when we finally achieve our goals, for when circumstances improve. We are always waiting for life to really begin. But life is not waiting. It is happening now, in these moments we dismiss as empty or transitional. The real opportunity is not in what we are waiting for. It is in learning to be fully present to what is already here. This does not mean you should not have goals or look forward to things. The merchant Kenji was waiting for represented real opportunity. The supplier was bringing goods he needed. Waiting for these things made practical sense. But waiting does not have to be suffering. It does not have to feel empty. When you can be present to the richness of the moment you are actually in, waiting becomes something different. Not emptiness, but fullness. Not life paused, but life happening in a quieter key. Think about how often you are waiting for something. Waiting for a decision, for a person, for circumstances to change, for clarity to come. If you treat all that waiting as empty time, you lose huge portions of your life to impatience and frustration. But what if you could find the richness in waiting itself? Not by pretending you do not want what you are waiting for, but by recognizing that the present moment has its own value regardless of what comes next. The seeds under the soil are not trying to rush their transformation. They are doing what seeds do at the pace that transformation requires. Some processes cannot be hurried. Some waiting cannot be eliminated. The only choice is whether to suffer through it or to find what is valuable in it. When you stop treating waiting as an enemy and start seeing it as part of life's rhythm, something shifts. You are no longer constantly frustrated by the gaps between what you want and what you have. You can rest in the actual moment, which is the only moment you truly have anyway. The peace this brings is not dramatic. It does not solve problems or change circumstances, but it removes a layer of unnecessary suffering. You stop fighting against time itself. You stop resenting the present moment for not being the future moment. You find that life, even when it includes waiting, is still worth being present for. As autumn arrived and the air turned crisp, Kenji found himself struggling with familiar frustrations. His business had its ups and downs. Some days felt easy, others difficult. He noticed himself worrying about money, questioning his choices, wondering if he was making progress or just spinning in circles. These were the same worries he had felt a year ago. The same anxious thoughts that had driven him to seek out the master in the mountains. He had learned so much since then, grown so much, changed so much. Yet, here he was again, feeling uncertain and lost. One morning, feeling particularly discouraged, he decided to walk up the mountain path behind the village. He needed to clear his head. The path wound through forest and over rocky sections, eventually leading to a viewpoint overlooking the valley. As he climbed, he recognized landmarks from previous walks. The twisted pine tree that looked like it was bowing. The flat rock perfect for resting. The stream crossing with stepping stones. He had been this way many times. When he reached the viewpoint, he found an old woman sitting there. She looked like a wanderer with weather-worn clothes and a walking stick beside her. "Beautiful view," she said as he approached. "Yes," Kenji agreed, sitting on a nearby rock. "I come here often when my mind is troubled." "What troubles you today?" Kenji hesitated, then explained. "I feel like I am back where I started. The same worries, the same struggles. I thought I had learned and grown, but maybe I have not changed at all." The old woman nodded slowly. "Do you know this path well?" "Very well. I have walked it many times." "And each time, does the path change?" "No. It is always the same path." "But do you walk it the same way every time?" Kenji thought about this. "I suppose not. In spring, the flowers bloom beside the path. In summer, shade from the leaves makes it cool. In autumn like now, the rocks can be slippery with leaves. And in winter, sometimes snow covers everything. So, the path is the same, but your experience of it changes?" "Yes." The old woman smiled. "And what about you? Are you the same person who walked this path a year ago?" Kenji started to say yes, then stopped. He thought about who he had been when he first climbed this mountain seeking the master. Anxious, confused, desperate for answers. He thought about who he was now. Still struggling at times, yes, but different in how he held those struggles. "I suppose I am not the same," he admitted. "Then you are not back where you started. You are on a familiar path, but you are a different walker." She stood and brushed off her clothes. "Growth is not a straight line going ever upward. It is more like a spiral. You return to familiar places, face familiar challenges. But each time you return, you bring different understanding. You are further along the spiral even when it feels like you are in the same spot." She pointed with her walking stick down into the valley. "From here, you can see your village. When you are down there, you cannot see the full pattern. But from up here, you can see that the river curves back on itself many times. Yet, it is always moving forward, always flowing toward the sea." Kenji looked at the river below. She was right. It twisted and turned, sometimes seeming to go backward. But it was always descending, always moving in the right direction despite the curves. "I have been judging myself for feeling familiar struggles," he said quietly. "I thought it meant I had not really learned anything." "It means you are human," the old woman replied. Humans do not learn something once and never struggle with it again. We learn in layers, in spirals, meeting the same lessons at deeper levels each time. She shouldered her pack. The pine tree that bows on this path is the same tree you have passed many times. But have you ever seen it exactly the same way twice? Morning light, afternoon light, in rain, in sun, in wind, in stillness. Always the same tree, always a different experience. She began walking down the path. Be patient with yourself. You are not going in circles. You are spiraling upward. What looks like the same place from one angle is actually a higher place when seen from another. Kenji sat at the viewpoint for a long time after she left. He thought about the times he had been hard on himself for struggling with things he thought he should have mastered. He thought about how he had dismissed his growth because he still faced challenges. But maybe that was the wrong way to see it. Maybe the point was not to reach a place where challenges never came. Maybe growth was about meeting the same challenges with more wisdom, more patience, more understanding. A few weeks later, Kenji faced a situation that would have panicked him a year ago. A large shipment was delayed, putting several deals at risk. His old self would have spiraled into anxiety, losing sleep, making the situation worse with frantic energy. But this time, he noticed the anxiety rising and met it differently. He still felt the worry. He still had to deal with the practical problem. But he did not add suffering on top of difficulty. He did not tell himself stories about failure or catastrophe. He just addressed what needed addressing and let the rest go. Afterward, he realized this was growth. Not the absence of challenge, but a different relationship with challenge. He was on a familiar part of the spiral, but he was higher up than before. The old woman's teaching about the spiral reveals something we often misunderstand about personal growth. We expect it to be linear, to move in a straight line from ignorance to wisdom, from struggle to ease. When we find ourselves facing familiar challenges, we think we have failed or backslid or learned nothing. But growth does not work that way. You do not learn something once and then never struggle with it again. You meet the same lessons repeatedly throughout life, each time from a slightly different position on the spiral. Think about Kenji's realization at the viewpoint. He was troubled by the same kinds of worries he had felt a year earlier. On the surface, this looked like no growth at all. But when he examined more closely, he saw he was meeting these worries differently. He had more tools, more perspective, more patience with himself. This is what growth actually looks like. Not the elimination of challenges, but a changing relationship with them. Not transcending human difficulty, but meeting it with more wisdom each time it appears. The river metaphor captures this beautifully. From up close, a river's curves can look like backward movement. But, from higher perspective, you can see it is always flowing forward, even when it seems to turn back on itself. The curves are not obstacles to progress. They are part of how progress happens. Your life is like that river. You might face the same essential challenges many times. Questions about your worth, your direction, your relationships, your purpose. These are not signs you are going nowhere. They are the terrain of being human. The growth is not in leaving them behind, but in how you navigate them. Kenji discovered this when he faced the delayed shipment. A year earlier, that situation would have consumed him with panic. This time, he still felt worry, but he did not add layers of suffering on top of the practical challenge. Same situation, different response. That is growth. We are often too hard on ourselves about this. We think if we were truly growing, we would stop struggling. We judge ourselves for having the same fears or doubts or questions we thought we had already worked through. This judgment itself becomes another layer of suffering. But the old woman's wisdom offers a gentler view. You are allowed to return to familiar territory. You are allowed to face the same lessons multiple times. This is not failure. This is the natural pattern of deepening understanding. Think about the twisted pine tree on the mountain path. Kenji had passed it dozens of times. He knew that tree. But did knowing it mean he could never have a new experience of it? Of course not. Each time he passed, conditions were different. Light, weather, season, his own mood. The familiarity did not prevent fresh seeing. Your challenges are like that tree. Yes, you have met them before. Yes, they are familiar. But each meeting is also new because you are new. You bring different understanding, different capacity, different perspective than last time. The peace that comes from recognizing this pattern is significant. You can stop berating yourself for not having transcended all difficulty. You can stop thinking something is wrong with you because you still struggle with familiar issues. You can recognize that spiraling through familiar territory at deeper levels is exactly how growth happens. This recognition also brings patience. If you understand that growth is a spiral rather than a line, you can be gentler with yourself when you meet old challenges. You do not need to have mastered everything. You just need to be slightly different in how you meet what comes. The old woman said to be patient with yourself. This is the heart of the teaching. You are not going in circles even when it feels that way. You are spiraling upward, meeting familiar places from higher positions on the spiral. Each time you face a challenge you have faced before, you have a choice. You can judge yourself for not having eliminated this challenge from your life. Or you can recognize that you are meeting it with whatever growth you have gained since last time. That recognition itself is a form of growth. The awareness that you are different even when circumstances seem the same. The understanding that progress is not measured by the elimination of difficulty, but by how you dance with difficulty when it appears. As you reflect on your own journey, notice where you have been hard on yourself for revisiting familiar struggles. Notice where you have dismissed your growth because you still face challenges. Can you see the spiral pattern? Can you recognize that you are not in the same place even when the view looks familiar? The path is the same. The challenges are familiar, but you are different. And that difference, however subtle, is the real measure of growth. Not perfection, not transcendence, not the absence of struggle. Just the slow spiral upward, meeting life with slightly more wisdom each time around. In the heart of winter, when snow covered the village and business was slow, Kenji spent his days organizing his stall and preparing for spring. One afternoon, a young potter named Daichi set up nearby. He was new to the market and clearly nervous. Kenji watched as Daichi arranged his pottery with shaking hands. Beautiful bowls and cups, each one carefully made. But when a customer picked up a bowl to examine it, Daichi hovered anxiously, giving too much information, answering questions the customer had not asked. The customer left without buying anything. Then another customer came, and the same thing happened. Daichi's nervous energy seemed to push people away. By midday, A customer was examining one of Daichi's finest pieces when Daichi reached out quickly to adjust how she was holding it. Startled, the woman jerked her hand. The bowl fell and shattered on the frozen ground. "You see?" Daichi shouted, his face red. "This is why I cannot trust people to handle my work properly." "You broke it." The woman stepped back, shocked. "You grabbed at me. I was holding it carefully until you startled me. It was a perfect bowl, and now it is ruined because you were careless." Daichi's voice carried across the market. The woman threw coins at his feet and walked away quickly. Other customers who had been approaching turned away. Daichi stood there breathing hard, his hands clenched into fists. Kenji walked over slowly. Daichi was picking up the broken pieces, his eyes wet with angry tears. "That bowl took me 3 days to make," Daichi said. 3 days, and she destroyed it in a moment. Kenji knelt down and helped gather the pieces. "What happened?" "She was holding it wrong. I tried to help, and she dropped it." "And then?" "Then I told her the truth. She was careless, and she broke my work." Kenji collected the last fragments and stood. "Come with me for a moment." They walked to where an old mason was repairing part of the market's stone wall. The mason had a heavy hammer and was working steadily, breaking and shaping stones. "Watch him," Kenji said. They watched as the mason brought his hammer down on a stone. It split perfectly where he wanted. He placed another stone and struck again. Another clean break. "Now you try," the mason said, holding out the hammer to Daichi. Daichi took the hammer uncertainly. He placed a stone and swung. The hammer glanced off, barely chipping it. He swung harder. The stone cracked wrong, splintering instead of splitting clean. "You are terrible at this," the mason said flatly. Daichi's face flushed. "I have never done it before." "That is no excuse. The stone is stone. The hammer is a hammer. You simply do not have the skill." Kenji saw Daichi's hands tighten on the hammer. His jaw clenched. For a moment, it looked like he might throw the hammer or storm off. But then something in his expression changed. He looked at the hammer, then at the mason. "You are right," Daichi said quietly. He handed back the hammer. "I do not have the skill, but the way you said it made me want to hit you with that hammer instead of the stone." The mason laughed, surprised. "Now you are learning. Come, let me show you the right way." As they walked back to Daichi's stall, Kenji asked, "What did you learn?" "That I react when people criticize me, even when they are right." "And what else?" Daichi was quiet for a moment. "That I did the same thing to the customer. She made a mistake, and I reacted with anger instead of responding with understanding. I made her feel the way the mason made me feel." "Yes," Kenji said. "The woman did not break your bowl on purpose. She was startled, but you treated her like she was careless and stupid. How did that feel when the mason did it to you? Terrible. I wanted to defend myself, to prove I was not stupid. That is what the woman felt too. And she will never buy from you now. Neither will anyone who heard you shout at her." They reached Daichi's stall. Several people were looking at his pottery, but keeping their distance. "What should I have done?" Daichi asked. "What if you had said to the woman, 'I am sorry I startled you. Are you hurt? Instead of blaming her, Daichi looked sick. She would have felt bad about the bowl instead of angry at me. Maybe she would have even offered to pay for it. But now she paid resentfully and left telling everyone about the rude potter who yelled at her. Daichi sat down heavily. I cannot take back what I said. No, but you can choose differently next time. You can notice when you are about to react with anger and pause. In that pause, you can choose a response that does not make things worse. Over the following weeks, Kenji watched Daichi practice this. A customer haggled too aggressively, and Daichi's face would flush. But then he would pause, breathe, and respond calmly. A child touched a cup with sticky fingers, and Daichi would start to snap, then stop and smile instead, gently guiding small hands away. It was not perfect. Sometimes Daichi still reacted before he could catch himself. But he got better at noticing the moment between what happened and how he responded. That small space where choice lived. One day, another bowl fell and broke. The customer was mortified, apologizing profusely. Daichi took a breath. These things happen. Are your hands okay? No cuts? He smiled. I have been meaning to try a new glaze anyway. This gives me a reason. The customer was so relieved and grateful that she bought 2 other pieces and told her friends about the kind potter at the market. Later, Daichi said to Kenji, "It is strange. When I stopped reacting with anger, people stopped being defensive. When I chose calm responses, situations that could have been terrible became opportunities." The bowl is still broken, Kenji pointed out. Yes, but I did not break the relationship with the customer. That is worth more than one bowl. Daichi's story shows us something crucial about how we create our own suffering. Between what happens to us and how we respond lies a space. In that space lives our power to choose. The bowl falling was unfortunate. The customer jerking her hand was understandable. But Daichi's reaction, his choice to blame and shout, created much more damage than the broken pottery. He turned one loss into many. He lost the bowl, the sale, the customer, and his reputation with everyone who heard him. All of that additional loss came from his reaction, not from the original event. We do this constantly. Something happens that we do not like, and we react automatically. Someone speaks sharply, and we snap back. A plan falls through, and we spiral into frustration. A mistake happens, and we lash out in blame. These reactions feel justified in the moment, but they almost always make things worse. The Mason's lesson was harsh, but effective. He showed Daichi exactly what it felt like to be on the receiving end of a harsh reaction. Daichi wanted to throw the hammer or storm off. He wanted to defend himself, to prove he was not stupid. Those impulses arose automatically. But then something important happened. Daichi paused. In that pause, he chose a different response. He acknowledged the truth without attacking back. That choice changed the entire situation. The Mason's harshness became an opportunity to learn instead of a reason for conflict. This is the heart of the teaching. You cannot always control what happens to you. Bowls will break. People will make mistakes. Plans will fail. Life will present difficulties. But you can always choose how you respond. The choice is not always easy. Daichi had to practice for weeks, and he still sometimes failed. But he got better at recognizing that space between stimulus and response. That tiny moment where choice lives. Think about your own reactions. How often do you respond to difficulty with automatic patterns that make things worse? How often does your quick anger or defensiveness or blame create new problems on top of the original one? The broken bowl was a loss. But Daichi's shouting turned it into something much bigger. When he learned to pause and choose his response, the next broken bowl became something smaller. An unfortunate accident that he handled with grace. The customer who broke the second bowl became a loyal buyer because of how Daichi responded. That would never have happened if he had reacted with anger. His choice to respond with kindness created value where his reaction had previously created harm. This is not about being perfect or never feeling angry. Daichi still felt the flash of frustration when the second bowl broke. The feeling is not the problem. The problem is reacting from that feeling without choosing your response. You can feel anger and still speak calmly. You can feel frustrated and still respond with patience. You can feel hurt and still choose not to hurt back. The feeling and the response are not the same thing. When you recognize this, you gain access to real freedom. You are no longer a puppet of your impulses, automatically reacting to whatever happens. You can feel what you feel and still choose what serves you and others better. This choice becomes easier with practice. At first, you might only notice after you have already reacted badly. That is fine. Noticing afterward is the first step. Then you start catching yourself during the reaction. Eventually, you might notice the impulse before you act on it. Each time you successfully pause and choose, you strengthen that capacity. The space between what happens and how you respond grows a little wider. Your reactions have less power over you. Your choices have more. The peace this brings is profound. When you stop reacting automatically to every difficulty, life becomes less chaotic. You still face challenges, but you do not multiply them with your own reactivity. You can meet what comes with more steadiness and wisdom. As spring approached, Kenji prepared for his busiest season. He had arranged a large shipment of fine cloth from a supplier in a distant province. The cloth was expensive, but he knew it would sell well when the wealthy families began ordering new robes for the festival season. The supplier promised delivery in 2 weeks. Kenji planned his entire spring around that timing. He turned down other opportunities, saved money for the purchase, and told customers when they could expect the special cloth. 2 weeks passed. No delivery. Kenji sent a message asking about the delay. The reply came back vague. Roads were difficult. Weather had been poor. The shipment would come soon. Another week passed. Then another. Kenji grew increasingly anxious. He had made commitments based on that delivery. Customers were asking when the cloth would arrive. His savings sat idle when he could have used that money differently. He felt frustrated with the supplier. Why make promises you cannot keep? Why not send accurate updates? His mind spun stories about being cheated or forgotten. One morning, as he sat at his empty stall, Yuki came by with a basket of herbs. "You look troubled," she said loudly. Kenji explained about the delayed delivery. "Nothing is going according to plan. I should have used that money for something else. I should have taken the other opportunities." This delay is ruining my spring." Yuki set down her basket. "Let me tell you something. Last year, I planted my herb garden in early spring like always. But then we had that late freeze, remember? It killed half my plants. I was so angry. All that work, all those seeds, destroyed." "I remember," Kenji said. "That was terrible timing. I thought so too. But here is what I did not know. The freeze also killed a pest that had been spreading through the region. If my herbs had already been growing strong, that pest would have destroyed them completely. The freeze saved my garden by killing my plants before the pest could." She picked up a dried herb and crumbled it between her fingers. "I also did not know that one of my customers was traveling during that time. If I had had herbs to sell, she would have bought from someone else. But because I had nothing, she waited and became my best customer." "So the disaster was actually good?" Kenji asked skeptically. "No. The disaster was a disaster. The cold killed my plants. That was real. But it was also connected to other things I could not see. The freeze that killed my plants also killed the pest. The timing that seemed so wrong turned out to have reasons I did not understand at the time." She looked at him directly. "Your delayed cloth is frustrating, but you do not yet know what it is saving you from, or what it is leading you toward." Kenji wanted to argue, but something made him pause. He had been so focused on how the delay was ruining his plans that he had not considered it might be part of a larger pattern he could not see. That afternoon, a merchant Kenji barely knew stopped by his stall. "I heard you have been expecting cloth from the eastern province." "Yes, but it has been delayed for weeks," Kenji said. The merchant looked uncomfortable. "I need to tell you something. The supplier you are working with has been having troubles. I received a shipment from him last month, and the quality was very poor. Nothing like what he promised. I lost money because I could not sell it." Kenji felt his stomach drop. The cloth was bad? Much worse than usual. I heard he switched to cheaper materials to increase his profit. Several merchants are refusing to work with him now. After the merchant left, Kenji sat with this information. His delayed shipment might have been poor quality cloth that would have damaged his reputation. If it had arrived on time, he would have bought it without knowing. He would have sold it to customers who trusted him. The consequences could have been severe. He could not know for certain if this was why the delay happened. Maybe the cloth would have been fine. Maybe he was just making up a comforting story. But the possibility shifted something in how he held his frustration. A week later, the shipment finally arrived. But Kenji inspected it carefully this time instead of accepting it immediately. The quality was indeed poor. He refused the delivery and demanded his deposit back. Without that money tied up, he was able to buy from a different supplier he met at the market. The new cloth was even better than what he had originally ordered, and because he bought it later in the season, he got a better price. By the time the festival season arrived, Kenji had excellent cloth that sold quickly at good profit. His spring turned out better than his original plans would have allowed. He thought about Yuki's story of the freeze and the pests, how something that seemed terrible at the time had been protecting her from something worse she could not see. He would never know for certain if the delay had saved him from a bad situation. But he learned to hold his frustrations more lightly. When things did not go according to plan, instead of immediately seeing disaster, he would think, "I do not yet know what pattern this is part of." Sometimes delays were just delays. Sometimes plans fell through for no good reason. But sometimes, more often than he would have guessed, what seemed to be working against him was actually working for him in ways he could only see later. This did not mean pretending to be happy when things were difficult, but it meant not adding suffering on top of difficulty by insisting he knew what everything meant before time revealed the larger pattern. Kenji's delayed shipment reveals something important about how we judge our experiences. We think we know what is good and what is bad based on our immediate wants and plans. But we are seeing from a very limited perspective. The delay frustrated Kenji because it disrupted his plans. From his position, it looked like pure problem, pure obstacle. He could not see that the cloth he was waiting for was poor quality. He could not see that the delay was protecting him from a situation that would have cost him much more than waiting cost. Yuki's story about the freeze that killed her herbs showed the same pattern. From inside the moment, it looked like disaster. She had lost work, lost seeds, lost time. Only later could she see that the freeze had also killed a pest and created timing that led to her best customer. This does not mean everything that seems bad is secretly good. That kind of thinking dismisses real suffering and real injustice. Sometimes terrible things are just terrible, but it means we often judge situations before we can see the full pattern they are part of. We are like someone looking at a tiny piece of a large tapestry. From our close perspective, we see random threads and cannot make out the design. We declare some threads wrong or ugly based on our limited view. But step back far enough, and those same threads are essential to the larger beauty. The hard part is that we cannot step back while we are living through something. We are always inside the moment, making judgments without seeing the whole. This is not a problem we can solve. We will never have complete perspective while we are in the middle of life. But we can hold our judgments more lightly. We can recognize that our certainty about what things mean is based on very partial information. We can create space for the possibility that we do not yet understand the full pattern. This does not mean passive acceptance of everything that happens. Kenji still had to make decisions. He had to deal with the practical reality of the delay. He still felt frustrated and anxious. The teaching is not about pretending. Difficulty does not exist. But he could hold that difficulty without adding the extra suffering of being certain it was all bad, all wrong, all disaster. He could acknowledge, "I do not like this delay, and I do not yet know what pattern it is part of." Both true at once. When he learned the cloth was poor quality, the pattern began to reveal itself. The delay that had seemed like pure obstacle had actually prevented a much worse situation. But even if he had never learned that, even if the delay had been meaningless, the practice of holding his judgments lightly would still have brought more peace. Because the suffering we create, by insisting we know what everything means, is often worse than the actual difficulty we face. Kenji's anxiety about the delay was worse than the delay itself. His stories about being cheated and forgotten were worse than not knowing why things were taking longer. When you can say, "I do not yet know what this means," instead of, "I know this is terrible," you remove layers of suffering you were adding to actual circumstances. The circumstances might still be difficult, but at least you are not making them worse with premature judgments about patterns you cannot yet see. This practice brings a particular kind of peace. Not the peace of everything going according to plan, but the peace of trusting that you cannot see the whole picture yet. The peace of knowing that what seems wrong today might be revealed as right later, or might just be what happened without being either good or bad in some cosmic sense. Life is more complex than our immediate judgments can capture. The delay that ruins your plans might be protecting you from something you cannot see. The opportunity that falls through might be making room for something better. The difficulty you face today might be teaching you something you will need tomorrow. Or it might not. You do not know. And that not knowing, held gently instead of anxiously, creates space for peace to emerge even in uncertainty. As you reflect on your own life, notice where you are absolutely certain about what things mean. Where you have decided something is purely bad, purely obstacle, purely wrong. What if you softened that certainty just a little? Not to false optimism, not to pretending difficulty is not real, but to genuine recognition that you cannot see the full pattern from where you stand. I do not yet know what this is part of. That simple acknowledgement can shift your relationship with difficulty in ways that bring more peace than having all the answers ever could. The tapestry is being woven. You are one thread among many. Trust that there might be a pattern larger than what you can currently see. And in that trust, find the peace of not having to know everything before you can rest in the midst of it. As you settle into rest tonight, you do not need to hold on to these teachings. Let them go. Trust that what needs to stay with you will stay. Trust that wisdom works in you even when you are not thinking about it. Let your breathing slow and deepen. Feel the weight of your body being held. Notice that you are safe right now, in this moment. Whatever tomorrow brings, you can meet it with the wisdom you have touched tonight. The masters and teachers in these stories learn that peace is not something to achieve, but something to uncover. It is always here, beneath the noise of thinking, beneath the layers of effort and grasping and worry. It has been here all along, patient and steady, waiting for you to recognize it. Tonight, let yourself recognize it. Not as a concept, but as a living presence. The peace that was here before your problems began and will be here after they resolve. The peace that needs nothing from you except your willingness to stop fighting long enough to feel it. Sleep well. Rest deeply. And know that the wisdom of these ancient teachings moves through you now, supporting your rest, guiding you toward the deep peace that is your natural home. You have traveled far tonight, not in distance but in understanding. Through Kenji's journey, you have walked paths that countless seekers have walked before. Each story has offered a doorway to peace, a way of seeing that can lighten the burdens we all carry. These teachings from Zen Buddhism are not meant to be grasped tightly or memorized perfectly. They are meant to settle in you the way rain settles into earth. Quietly, naturally, in their own time. You learn that your mind colors everything you see, that the separation you feel from others is not as solid as it seems, and that forcing and grasping push away what you want while allowing and opening let things come naturally. You discovered that your body holds wisdom your thinking mind often ignores, that difficulties might be part of larger patterns you cannot yet see, and that between what happens and how you respond lives a space where real freedom waits. All of this wisdom has always been here, waiting for you to recognize it. Kenji's journey is your journey. His struggles are your struggles. His discoveries are available to you right now, not as ideas to think about, but as truths to live into. As you settle into rest tonight, you do not need to hold on to these teachings. Let them go. Trust that what needs to stay with you will stay. Trust that wisdom works in you even when you are not thinking about it. Your day is complete. Your work is done for now. Sleep well, and thank you for joining us here at Sleepy Monk.